Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the League's 20th COVID webinar, Stimulating Economic Development in Your City. We appreciate you all for being here and connecting. As you all know, COVID-19 has rapidly changed the way that cities operate. And in order to meet these moments, the League has been producing these series so for you to learn from each other and ask questions. So please ask questions to our speakers today. Next slide. Before we get started, I am Megan McKelvey with the League of California Cities, and I'm just gonna let you know on how to ask some questions. So a little housekeeping notes. If you are planning on speaking today, please make sure that you are connected through your audio. You are all currently on mute. But you can check your audio if you go to the bottom of your screen and click that little icon which says participants. Also, just so you know, this will be recorded. And for this recording and for other recordings of our COVID-19 webinar series, please visit www.cacities.org/coronavirus. And you will be receiving notification about this webinar when it is up on our website. So the most important slide, how to ask a question. Our speakers want to hear from you. You have two different ways of submitting your question. First is through the verbal cue. In order to do that, click on participants and raise your hand. We will call on you on the order that we see your name. And then we will unmute you and you can ask a question to both our speakers. Second way is through the chat box, that's also on the bottom of your screen. If you have any questions or are having technical problems, please chat with us through the chat box and you can directly chat with me and ask your questions. Just click Megan McKelvey and I will ask your questions. So now let me introduce our two great speakers today. Today we have Mayor Linda Evans from City of La Quinta, and we have Eric Dicehart, Economic Development Manager for the City of Pasadena. Thank you both so much for joining this webinar. And now I'd like to pass it over to Eric.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I'm happy to be here. Good afternoon, everybody. So I'm hoping to just give you a quick introduction to Pasadena and things that we've been up to. So next slide, please. So most of you probably have heard of Pasadena before. Many people affiliate us with the Rose Bowl and with the Rose Parade, maybe JPL as well in Caltech. More recently, we're known as the place where the Big Bang Theory TV show takes place, but hopefully that'll fade over time. Next slide, please. But in reality, we are a city of 141,000 people. And we are a kind of job center for the San Gabriel Valley. We are about 13 miles north of downtown LA. And we are a full service, I would say plus type of municipal service city with police and fire. We have our utility with water and power. We're one of 3 cities, maybe 4 in the state that have its own health department, which has been interesting of late. And then we have a Convention and Visitors Bureau, the Rose Bowl, and a budget in the general fund category of $275 million. But when you look at the kind of service plus total budget of our city, we're up to $870 million. So good size of budget. Next slide, please. So how has COVID impacted Pasadena? So as many of you have experienced, unfortunately, restaurants have been really just shut down for many weeks. We're working hard to open them up, but we have over 500 in Pasadena. Retail, significant job loss and revenue loss for our general fund. So that hopefully is curving back up, but not as quick as we'd like. And the Rose Bowl, if you think about it, no one can get together. And so there's significant impacts to our Rose Bowl, our convention center. Pasadena is known as an eventful city. We have lots of other things that are going on between our historic playhouse. So all that kind of fun activity has been curtailed and slowly starting to consider reopening now. And as all of the other city representatives know, hotels have been down to almost single-digit occupancy of late. So I'll go through that quickly. And as I mentioned, we have our own health department. So we have to comply in Pasadena, of course, with the state and the county, but we can tinker around with some of our local rules as far as protocols locally. But ultimately, there's been a lot of collaboration in LA County with Pasadena and Long Beach, which also has its own health department. Next slide. So we have a tagline of "Future Yourself Here." So between our tech companies and people who want to visit, that's something that we've had in place for a while for the marketing teams of different cities out there. But many people are familiar with Pasadena, maybe old Pasadena and parts of our downtown, but we have 13 different commercial areas that we want to make sure we promote and work with. Next slide. I mentioned the Rose Bowl. So normally we have 1 or 2 events each month happening at the Rose Bowl. And we had a pretty busy year last year, and crickets in the last 4 months. So that's been a significant loss to our revenues. The Rose Bowl went through some significant renovations a few years ago, so we have to pay the mortgage on that. So some challenges on that front. Next slide. In our convention center, kind of same boat. We went through a large renovation of that less than 10 years ago. It's a active convention center. We're not on the level of a LA or a San Diego, but we're bigger than any large hotel. So we have a niche that we are happy with here in town. And ultimately, it's been very quiet there as well. We worked with our local hospital to convert one of the ballrooms into a place as a backup for COVID care. So we had 200 plus beds set up. Luckily didn't need them, but that was part of our response related to the convention center. Next slide. So if you look at the convention center, from mid-March through June, we had 68 events planned. And you can kind of see how it's broken down to what has been canceled outright. That is in the let's see here, in the blue, and what has been postponed. Our staff there works hard to make sure they don't lose clients, but ultimately trying to just find other dates. But that's been very difficult with some uncertainty as to when the health openings are going to be allowed, but also when the consumer demand kicks back in, because people are still reluctant. I have a couple of slides here of America's Got Talent. They were in our convention center the week that the shutdown occurred. So they literally just kind of walked away from their set, and it's been there ever since. So that was been kind of strange for sure. Next slide. So from a hotel occupancy, I'm sure this is reflected in your numbers as well, but January through April, the yellow is last year, and the teal color is this year. You can see the massive drop from February to end of March. So a significant loss of revenue. We've had a couple large hotels that just shut down. The Langham in the bottom right-hand corner is a great old hotel in Pasadena, and they made the decision just to close completely for more than a couple months. So others like the Hilton hover around 10–15% occupancy during the shutdown, and hopefully that's bubbling back up again. Next slide. So from an economic development standpoint, we really kind of had to shift gears like many of you did. We went ahead and started, of course, a web page related to the COVID information. What became relevant right away is what our Small Business Development Center, SBA, had in place, so to connect with them and summarize things for our customers. We started a local Pasadena newsletter online for the business community to be kind of aware. We had about 5,000 subscribers to that. Next slide. And webinars. So we, just like we're doing now here, we started to organize, go back one slide. we hosted various webinars too to the business community. So, okay, now go forward. So we started a takeout directory as our restaurants were trying to stay afloat and get customers for just takeout only. And this is an example where we cooperate with our Chamber of Commerce, but sometimes there's some tension too, because as we get into the takeout directory to make sure we're including all restaurants, not just Chamber members, that of course causes a little bit of a discussion with the Chamber. We had Connect Pasadena, a program where all of our cultural venues really stepped up for some visual content so that people, as they're staying at home, could visit local resources and stay connected with some of our museums and places that normally would be a venue for gatherings, at least providing information kind of on a different path. We had weekly blogs, and we're very much encouraging local retailers to step up their online sales. And something that you don't really pay attention to, as at least from our perspective as a government agency, how the individual retailers, how their presence online was minimal at best in most cases. So we've really tried to encourage them to step up. That's sometimes a challenge. And then just calls. We would proactively call people to see how they were doing. So to get a kind of a gauge of what issues were relevant. Next slide. And weekly conference calls with our kind of primary business groups. So the Chamber of Commerce, the Visitors Bureau, we've got kind of a regional mall in Pasadena, and representatives from the business district. So Old Pasadena, the Playhouse District, or now known as Playhouse Village, South Lake, have their executive directors on that call each week. And we would go and try and alternate with different themes. So first it was the health director providing some updates. Then we went to our transportation director as we were trying to figure out how to use sidewalks and streets. Our planning department, if there were any permitting issues for reopening. And then unfortunately, with some of the gatherings taking place and protests lately, we also had the police on the line too to work with those stakeholders. Next slide. And our webinar series, where we were trying to get our health department in front of these different business sectors to convey information and to go through the different protocols for opening. So we had a dozen different webinars just for our Pasadena business community members, based on, again, restaurants, office space, personal care, manufacturers. And we ranged anywhere from 30 to 180 different participants on each of those. Next slide. And then just to go through a few other points here before I hand it off, we are the lead city of a 6-city consortium for workforce development. So we kind of made sure we stepped up in the significant loss of jobs. We're awarded a grant more recently from the state, but that WIB office certainly had to step up and help a variety of people as they were laid off and looking for unemployment insurance and other resources. Next slide. Other few things I wanted to mention. So the hospitality industry is certainly important. We normally have quarterly meetings with them anyway, and we've had to kind of step that up as well. In Pasadena, we have our own utility. So one of our first ideas of helping relieve the stress and the kind of constraints that our business community was in is an $11 million utility rebate that went to both commercial and residential customers. We've been active in the food program, both supplementing our school district with meals over the weekends. So coming from city funding to support that, and the Great Plates, which you've heard about and probably participate in. So we took on that program as a city as well. Weird silver lining items, our ice rink, which is affiliated with our convention center. That's been running nonstop for more than 10 years now. So now that it was not getting used, we went forward with some much needed maintenance on that. And more recently, we worked with our council to approve a small business grant, something that we didn't take on right away because we thought of different opportunities, but ultimately we are also pursuing funding $500,000 worth of grants, and hopefully our local community foundation is also going to raise some money and help us manage that effort. Next slide. So business goes on. We have a lot of construction, and I won't go through the details, but our permitting office had to shift gears a bit, but ultimately that activity has still been going strong in town. Next slide. And kind of a unique thing in Pasadena that, at least from an economic development standpoint, we've always paid close attention to and worked with our different partners is just the academic and institutional groups in town. We are fortunate to have Caltech. They're growing. Art Center College of Design, they just had their master plan approved. We have a brand new School of Medicine that's finalizing right now. Their first class is scheduled to arrive in the next few weeks. Doheny and UCLA have an eye institute under construction here in town, and then JPL. So when times get tough and people aren't coming to visit and retail's down, the stability of our institutional partners becomes more relevant. So it's something just I thought I'd share that has been part of our effort here in Pasadena. So I think that's the last slide. Next slide. Yeah, so with that, we'll take questions later, and I'll hand it off to La Quinta.
Great, thank you so much, Eric. So we're going to talk about a little town in the greater Palm Springs area compared to the beast of a Pasadena that almost functions as a mini county. I do first want to thank my team that's with me here today, Marcy and Katie in marketing, and Gil and Doug in economic development to help put this presentation together. And I know that we've got a couple of our local business partners. We've got Gretchen that's listening in. She's with Desert Valley Business Builders Association, and Deb McGarry, who's the gas company. She's our legislative liaison, and both are critical to the work that we do as we make decisions in La Quinta about growth and development and continuity of service. So thanks, team, for being out there. And I've got a few friends that I see on the list too, so thanks for tuning in. Probably wondering, why is the mayor making a presentation on economic development and or something for the league that promotes business? And I wanted to just share a little bit about the unique position that I have. I am an elected mayor, one of 5 council members. We are a city manager run city. We are a newer city that was incorporated in 1982. I'll share a little bit more about that later. But I've been on the council since '09 and mayor since '14. But my full-time job is Chief Strategy Officer for Desert Care Network. I work for Tenet Healthcare. It's a for-profit hospital company. And we used to have St. Luke Medical Center out in Pasadena. Eric, I worked there a number of years ago. Yes, very old, 1932, great architecture out there. No longer in our system, but it's being part of the healthcare network. I'm not clinical, but I'm part of the administrative and executive team and do a lot of liaison outreach with the other elected officials, county health department, other hospital leaders, et cetera. So throughout this COVID pandemic, I've been able to utilize and take advantage of the information that we've got in 2 of the 3 hospitals out here in our community at the Coachella Valley, which is the greater Palm Springs area, and use that to help make our decisions either as a city or to advocate with our other mayors. We're one of 9 cities from Palm Springs to Coachella, so we're all little pieces of the greater Coachella Valley bubble, and we try to work in unison in most things as we make decisions on a regional level, things like hospitality, things like regional transportation, economic development, homelessness, all those things we work very well together as our 9 cities. But having the full-time blend of that and then bringing that back to how it impacts our community, we've been able to just really have firsthand knowledge of what's happening with the pandemic and then what is it impacting our community and how. And even started at the first drive-through testing site with the county as partner and volunteer for the first few weeks of the pandemic. So I saw the sick people coming through wanting to get tested when we first became available for that. We've seen our hospital numbers avert the surge that everybody was preparing for, and kudos to everyone for the work that you've done collectively to keep numbers relatively down compared to a New York. But we're also starting to see those rise a little bit. I believe that we know and we've learned in the last 2 or 3 months of what we can do to alter that and work on our behavior, the cleanliness, all of those things. But I am very much a pro advocate for business, and that's why we're focusing on what we can do to make sure that our small city sustains through this pandemic, just like we did through the recession back in the mid-2000s. So with that, you did notice here, JPA Chair for Greater Palm Springs Convention Visitors Bureau. So we do have that regional aspect, and elected officials are on the JPA as well as hospitality leaders. So that is an important piece of what we're doing to try to push forward. La Quinta made a decision early on that we wanted to be leaders to try to push to reopen as soon as we could, either as a sub-region of the greater Riverside County, which is 2.5 million people. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see how La Quinta fits into that. We're just over 40,000 residents. We are located in really, it would be East Riverside County or Coachella Valley. Yes, this is about 4 miles from where I'm sitting right now is where Stagecoach and Coachella Fest happens. So if that gives you a proximity, or if you've ever been to the famous La Quinta Resort, that's home. That's our home here. And you're looking at the view of our Civic Center Park, both behind me and in the screen right now. We're a small city again, and although we've got a working population, so when you look at the average age of 45 years old, people think that we might be a retirement community. 20% of that population is over 65 and 20% are 0 to 18. So it really has changed from kind of that PGA West retirement community or that second home to visit during the great months to very much a thriving balance of family, retired, wealthy people. We have a high amount of wealth in our city, but we also have upwards to 1,800 affordable housing units that we've created over the years that you couldn't tell them besides a resort or a country club. Let's go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Some of the things about our business, we're very much more residential than we are business. We've got one main corridor, which is Highway 111. If you've been out to the desert and you've cruised Highway 111, that's where the bulk of our big businesses, big box, our car dealerships are located. And then we have just a couple other areas that are small, more boutique, family-owned type businesses for people to enjoy here. However, the businesses are about 1,290, as you can see, and some of them are storefronts, a lot of them are home-based. And our revenue is very much driven by sales tax and TOT, the hotel tax. The rest of that percentage is property tax. And as I mentioned earlier, we're a newer city. Because we're a post-Prop 13 city, we're only getting 7 cents on the dollar for our sales tax. The majority of that 25 cents goes to the county. And there's even several parts of our boundaries, our city boundaries, that are still part of a county development area from RDA land. And they're even getting our measly 7 cents on the dollar in some of the highest end homes, like the Madison Club, which is where the Kardashians bought. So Stallone just sold his house there. We've got Tom Brady there, Phil Mickelson. So that even that 7% is going to the county right now until those bonds expire in 2033. So we're extremely dependent on our hotel and our sales tax in our city. When you look at the total revenue and total budget of a Pasadena compared to a La Quinta or some of the cities I'm seeing across the screen, it's all relative, right? We're all feeling the impact in whatever that big amount of revenue we thrive on and need to ensure safety, ensure infrastructure, ensure employment and service for our community. But even in our small way, we're feeling it, quite honestly. Let's go to the next slide. We said early on we needed to do something. On March 17th, our council meetings are the first and third Tuesdays. On March 17th, we did declare La Quinta City, we did declare an emergency for ourselves, knowing that it was going to get worse. And it was on the 19th when Governor Newsom went ahead and shut down the state. It was the following week, the emergency meeting that we held, that we then allocated $1.5 million to small business loans. And on a smaller scale, some of the business assistance that we've been able to provide, similar to what most cities have done, because I've looked at several different websites, we've developed a microsite specifically for COVID-19. And that microsite clearly shows anything under the sun that either has come out from the city, the county, the state. It does have information about the Great Plates program, anything about takeout. One of the things our convention visitors bureaus did, they do regional programs, so we can kind of do that, stay at home, take a plate, still support kind of restaurant week, even though restaurant week isn't a dine-in option. And we also have supported our local Find Food Bank to the tune of $40,000 to help put food on the tables of our residents. And we've also looked at the senior shopping hours, all of those elements that we've tried to be a resource online and through all the social media outreaches that we can do to keep our residents and our businesses informed. The top right is an example of a banner program that we did. It either says takeout and delivery or open for business. And these were banners that we produced for free that we partnered with the Chamber of Commerce, whether you're a member or not. And I understand that sometimes that's a controversy, so that those stores that were still open or those essential businesses that were available to do takeout, curbside pickup, all those things, we could help promote. So it was a branded, we're very much into that branded looking to look, so that people kind of connect to the fact that there's still some opportunities to support local business. If you look at the middle, the safer together, greater together, if you go to the website visitpalmsprings.com, visit Greater Palm Springs or visitpalmsprings.com, that is our CVB's website. And this is called a pledge. And the pledge is about safely reopening. We actually are going to take this beyond the Coachella Valley. And the CVB is now introducing this to all of Riverside County businesses at the request of the Riverside County Board of Supervisors. So Scott White, who's our CVB CEO, he's taken a strong lead on the Economic Recovery Task Force that the county put together, so that we can make sure that the industry, especially hospitality and tourism, which is really the driver for the Greater Palm Springs area in its entirety, we can make sure that as we re-enter that leisure travel phase that we can now do, that we're doing it safely with the right protocols in place. And so we're asking our businesses, not only in hospitality, cities, small businesses, to take that pledge. And there is a kind of an iconic logo with the checkbox that will show you on the hotels, et cetera, who's taken the pledge and who can ensure that we're meeting those state standards and guidelines. All right, let's go to the next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about the loan program. We first thought we could do a grant, and then we recognized people were still in the early phase of either trying to get small business loans or PPP or whatever they were trying to get their hands on. And we didn't want to compromise those businesses from being eligible if they had some grant on their books from the city. So we did it as a loan so that they did show debt, so that could possibly help them. Plus, we wanted to do something faster, since it seems like, you know, that first round, the state ran out of money and it was taking people a long time to get through. So we pulled together an ad hoc committee, not so much different than any other city would do when they do kind of a one-off type of program. And we've got a couple council members, finance folks, and city staff. So we did not involve a bank per se. We were the bank. We wanted to make it streamlined and easier. And basically we launched the application on our website, which it is still there, laquintaca.gov. You're able to look at the application. And we did a very short period of time. People can apply for that loan, small businesses. And then of course you do the review process, we approve it, we announce those winners of the loan. So let's talk a little bit about the loan, if we can go to the next slide, please. Again, we allocated 1.5 million. Of that 1.5, we wanted to make sure that 500,000 went to restaurants. Many of our restaurant and business owners in La Quinta also are residents of La Quinta. So it was a very close connection in terms of the impact. We do have big box stores here. We do have a Costco and a Super Walmart and the Targets and the Best Buys. Those are still operating, but they weren't part of the economic relief program. Basically, we did 5, 10, 15, and 20,000. And the initial round, this is kind of round one, because we learned from our first stint that we wanted to look at the number of employees that kind of based how much money they were eligible for based on how much they were paying out in payroll. We wanted to make sure either the business was able to reopen when we could or stay open if they were one of the essentials and could be there. It was a 0% loan, 2 years to repay that loan, and that repayment doesn't start until April of 2021. We had promissory notes that each loan recipient signed. We did discuss internally about a forgiveness program. That's not out of the question per se, but it's not part of how we promoted it or announced it. And then the firm is WiseHive. If you haven't looked at WiseHive, they put an online application system where you can upload all the documents for that business. So that's all part of the criteria. That helps protect that information from becoming public record. What is public record is who got the loan and how much they got, but none of their loan, W-2, 1099, all of their tax information, balance sheets, payroll information, things like that. So if we go to the next slide, round one, then we awarded of that 1.5 million, 330,000, and that included 36 businesses, and almost 100,000 was restaurant specific. So we said, all right, let's do some expansion, because what we learned, our economic development team, we're basically hand-holding and answering questions constantly for our businesses on the criteria, on what they needed, how do we make it work, how do they qualify. And so we expanded things. We expanded things to like the exterminator or the caterer that might be working out of their home. They don't have a storefront, but they still have a need to keep operations going. And we also had a couple restaurants that were not chain restaurants, but did have more than 25 employees. And so we opted to look at how do we expand that. So we went round 2, and that way we were able to throw out another 180,000 with 18 more businesses to help. So we said, okay, well, this is good. People are very happy. The money came around fairly quickly to them. We got some good news coverage on it. They were very grateful. And one of the things that we did learn as they were providing their information was how high the rent is in La Quinta for some of these commercial businesses. And I don't know about some of you, but some of our biggest challenges in partnering to make changes in a commercial corridor or just improvements to vacant property and commercial space has been the people that own the center. And we've got a few son of a guns here in La Quinta, quite honestly, that are very difficult to work with. But we've got wonderful businesses who want to be in La Quinta and choose to be in La Quinta. So some of this money really just kept rent going for them so that they could reopen or be able to ramp up quicker without having that debt. Again, we just looked at how high some of the commercial rates were here compared to either side of us in terms of Indio or Indian Wells or Palm Desert. And that was kind of alarming to us, but again, made us want to help those businesses more. So let's go to round 3. Round 3, we said, okay, now we want to just try to give away money if we can. And so we created the rebate program. And that really became, as things started to be pushed to reopen in different stages based on the roadmap to recovery, we looked at how do we get these businesses opened under those state guidelines. And so we said, well, all the money that these businesses have to spend to make them meet that criteria, we will reimburse them up to 80% of those costs, up to $20,000 per business. So that's what round 3 looks like. And basically we've had about 11 so far, 11 businesses that have already submitted, and that could be for those plastic or plexiglass coverings. It could be for hand sanitizers. It could be for different signage on the doors, you know, those wipeable menus, whatever it takes to get them to meet the standards so that they could reopen in a safe manner. Those are eligible items under the rebate program. And businesses who have started making those investments that may have received loans are still eligible for that rebate program. And we decided that, again, some businesses in La Quinta, like all of Palm Springs, because it's slower in the summer and our snowbirds are not here, and it's 110, there's not as much activity. So a lot of businesses and restaurants won't reopen until October, November. So we went ahead and extended the ability to submit reimbursements under the new rebate program up until the end of this calendar year, or when we run out of money. Let's go to the next slide. So then one of the things as we look at reopening and what we have to do to try to keep the capacity issues, the social distancing issues, et cetera. And I know that many of you are looking at this in your cities as well, as we've kind of created that alfresco program. And that's where we extend the indoors to the outdoors for a lot of restaurants. Now, again, we are not in La Quinta closing down streets per se. I mentioned that we have a commercial corridor that runs along Highway 111. We had just gone through an extensive process and consultant study, focus groups, charrettes, business meetings to reinvent the Highway 111 corridor, knowing that big box stores were not going to be around forever. And how do we get retailtainment activated to keep that desire to be someplace versus let's just go to Sprouts, get our groceries and leave. And say, what else can we do to activate those asphalt parking lots, quite honestly, to do something more? So the alfresco program is going to help answer some of those questions because we've lightened up all of the codes and restrictions and permit requirements to work with our businesses to create that outdoor dining or outdoor signage or store experience. And we're just in the beginning phases of looking at how do we work with the center owners again to maybe utilize either parking spaces, build patios, things like that. So besides the 111 corridor, the other area we have in La Quinta is called Old Town, which isn't so old, but it's very quaint. And that is a kind of owned by a single person with all of the lessees inside. They do have their own little main street, and that could be something that could be blocked either on occasion. We do art fairs there, farmers market, things like that. And that's a perfect place for the alfresco program. So what we're doing with Alfresco is either working with the restaurants that have applied for the ABC, the temporary catering authorization, where they can start serving alcohol out in those areas, and then helping reimburse under the rebate program to help make some of those accommodations happen. So this is kind of exciting because it lends itself into what we were working to create before the pandemic hit. And this will be an opportunity to fast track it for us and be a little bit more fast moving in terms of making things happen to help these businesses out. Let's see, what's the next slide? I think we're about wrapped. So for La Quinta, we've got a number of ways to stay in touch. Again, our La Quinta website, the first top bar is all things COVID, which really means all things that we're doing to help our residents, to ensure our community stays safe, and to look at business opportunities for expansion, for modifications, for loans, for reimbursement, and things like that. So I think with that, I'll breathe and we'll move to Q&A, I guess.
Great, thank you so much. We are going to move to the Q&A slide again. As we get started, there are two ways, again, to ask questions. One is if you click on your participants, you can raise your hand and we will call on you for a verbal question. And the other way is to type your question in the chat box and we will get to as many questions as we can. I do have a first question for Mayor Evans. Mayor Evans, your Alfresco program that has the temporary outdoor seating, now you just opened that up. And is there an end date to that? And it does get hot in La Quinta, as you know. Does that outdoor seating include some kind of air and water cooler systems? Like, how are you going to keep it going when it gets 120 degrees in your city?
Yeah, great question. And clearly in our community in the summer months, you go out early for an outdoor breakfast or early lunch, and then you go out a little bit later for something in the afternoon or early evenings. Yes, so what we're doing is we're working with the businesses on what they're looking to do, how many seats they want, how many parking spaces if that's the case, or how they want to extend the shade structures, if they want to add misters. Again, some of this is city-owned land, but very little of it is. It's more about working with the business and the property owner to figure out how we can share tables and chairs between restaurants, how we can provide some shade structures, whether it be with landscaping or with the sail shades, and or add things like the misters. But clearly in the summer out here, people just know they're not necessarily eating outside all around. So this is going to be an ongoing, we want this to last beyond the pandemic. We want this to be able to be another way that we can create an experience in La Quinta with all of the beautiful scenery we have, and the mountains and the palm trees. We're extremely safe, extremely clean city, and this will just lend itself for more outdoor. We're very much a health and recreation, health and well-being. There's a lot of activities that not only the amenities the city provides, but are available that will just lend people the opportunity to spend more time outside if they've got a conducive environment to do that with.
Mayor, you said that you didn't close any streets off, and we're seeing a lot of cities close the street off for walkways and to increase the restaurant capacity. What was the discussion behind that?
Well, we don't really have those roadways where you would close streets in order to open things up. So we have big parking lot shopping centers that we would scale back the inside, but not the main roads. And then our little old town does have one meandering street, and that's an option to stay open or closed, and that's really the owner's option. But we're able to, because of just the small pockets of where we have commercial, we won't have to close streets like even downtown Palm Springs. They're really looking at closing some major thoroughfares to block those off, to allow kind of a free flow, like that block party atmosphere between lots of different restaurants and clubs. That's just not the way that our city is laid out. So we're fortunate to not have to go to that extreme.
This is a question for both of you. We've seen a lot of taco truck restaurants go to brick and mortar. Have you seen any brick and mortar go back to the taco trucks and have started trying to recoup business that way in either one of your cities?
Well, in Pasadena, there's been a handful of cities that had the traditional style of seating, and even 5 years ago, they experimented with taco trucks. So that, I think is a bone of contention, I think, with some of the restaurateurs in town, where those park, you know, on a normal week post-COVID, where we had lots of different people walking on sidewalks to take advantage of the vibe of like old Pasadena. Certainly the restaurants there did not want kind of the food trucks parking in any convenient spot. So we've had to deal with that for a while. And at least to date, that hasn't really bubbled up as a kind of COVID issue.
And for La Quinta, really the only time that we have food trucks that come into the city is when we're doing special events, whether it's movie in the park, it's some type of downtown, little old town concert in the park, that type of thing. Food trucks aren't necessarily a regular welcome commodity unless it's a special order for a special event.
Great. How has the city of Pasadena engaged their downtown business improvement district during this time? Have you had any collaboration there?
Yeah, so we have 3 different business improvement districts in our downtown. So we are talking to them weekly. And, you know, normally it's about parking, it's about kind of, you know, problems with, you know, maybe some events that there's a challenge of trying to get the, you know, people in and out. So that has it's been much different. We went from metered parking and paid garages to, you know, essentially curbside free 20 minutes throughout the city during the COVID crisis. So we contemplated opening that up this week. So we're going to push it a little bit longer, but it'll go back to kind of priced parking fairly soon. But we have engaged with them on a regular basis. But again, it even stepped up when we had a few of the protests in town where we had to kind of get people behind strategies and making sure we were all working together on that. But it's a pretty strong collaboration.
So Eric, you said something about priced parking. Is parking downtown right now free?
So in our downtown, it varies by street. So in the old Pasadena area, it's 90 minutes free, and then it's like $6 a day. That's a case in the South Lake area as well. In the middle of the city, it's slightly different. So it's based on specific pockets of demand, and it's, you know, it's a challenge. It's always a fight about parking on a regular basis, but that's again a silver lining of COVID. That's not been a fight lately. Yeah.
But you're still requiring people to pay for parking during the COVID?
No, so street parking, it's been essentially free. We have not been monitoring that. We've been putting out signs, 20-minute parking, just to get people to kind of park there, get food, and to kind of transition away so that they're not parking there all day long. But yeah, we've loosened up enforcement.
Have you had conversations on when that's going to end, like when paid parking is going to happen?
Yeah, it's just a matter of days now. I mean, we tried to kind of push it 2 weeks ago, and there was some reluctance to go too fast. But now that everything's kind of opening up, we're pretty much going to go back to the standard operating procedure on that.
Are you going, we did a parking webinar, which was actually our very first one of the COVID series. So are you going to issue warnings first or put signs up?
We've been issuing warnings, yeah, both.
Okay.
So, and we have various municipal garages too. So we've, normally those are full of monthlies and transient parkers. And it's been a lot different lately, that experience. So that demand is nowhere near what it typically is yet.
Yeah. Mayor, about your alfresco program, are you allowing parking lots to be repurposed with reduced parking so you can increase and encourage the social distancing?
Absolutely. We have too much asphalt. And again, we had done a study with Urban Land Institute upwards to nearly 2 years ago and then put a plan together. We've had 12 or 13 specific plans along our very small 2-mile stretch of commercial corridor. And so we are looking at how do we reinvent those. We also have a trail, a multi-use path that really starts in Palm Springs and will go all the way to the East Valley. And it's called CV Link. It's through the Coachella Valley Association of Governments. So we get a very short 2-mile stretch of that as well. And it really backs up on the south side of the levee, which is the backside of that exact commercial corridor. So we're engaging connectors there, signage on the back of those buildings where it wasn't allowed before. And we are definitely working with the center owners to eliminate as much parking as possible, because it simply isn't needed based on the types of businesses or the future of potentially types of cars people will use. We very much tried to encourage pedestrian friendly or bicycles or golf carts. So yes, we are doing whatever we can to eliminate parking spaces. We still will have plenty of parking in La Quinta. It's free in La Quinta, and that hasn't been a problem for us, which makes this transformation a lot easier for us in terms of creativity and access to space.
Are you allowing those restaurants to use grills or like pizza, stuff so they can cook outside?
Well, they always have to go by the health department rules. And we've learned when we do Taste of La Quinta or other things like that, that the health department has certain standards of what and how they cook outside, and the coverings, the drains, the sinks, all those things. But we have no problem if they meet those standards to allow that to occur.
Now fees. This is for both of you.
Mhm.
Are fees and regulations being waived for certain businesses, including banner, blade signs, temporary signs? Are you waiving any fees for your businesses?
Yeah, banners in Pasadena normally are permitted, but with permit, and we're trying to loosen up that. The sandwich boards, normally those block sidewalks and can be irritating, and we've started to allow those.
Top text.
A lot of the kind of opening requirements don't require a permit, no fees, but there's probably a dozen different postponements or fee reductions that we've brought forward to council as well. As far as health department reviews that normally require a fee, we've kind of waived, and some of the business license items as well.
Same in La Quinta. We want to make this as simple as possible. We have a very, in addition to our hotel tax component, we have a large base of short-term vacation rentals in the city of La Quinta that we've allowed, encouraged. We have an ad hoc committee of residents, both pro and against short-term rentals. And so we've, postponed and prorated both their business license and their permits for those. And then as we look at the alfresco, we're definitely waiving that component to try to make it happen, unless it's something that's structurally necessary or changing, or if it's specific to health department. Again, we know that it's been tough times. We have not had, except for a soup plantation that does exist in La Quinta that is now, of course, from a company-wide standpoint, out of business. We have not had, knock on wood, any of our small businesses that are not reopening. So everybody is hanging on best they can with whatever help they can get to stay afloat.
Eric, do you have businesses that are reopening or decided not to reopen?
It's hard to tell. So far, we expect that some will not open again, but we've not done a full assessment yet. We have more to track. So we have 500 just restaurants.
Yeah.
And we expect some of those to close. In fact, we were already worried in January that some of our larger sit-down restaurants, or the traditional formats, were struggling because all the new restaurants have smaller footprints. They have more emphasis even on takeout. Fine dining options were quite diverse, and the traditional places that had high rent and a lot of staff and with minimum wage, we're already kind of considering a shutdown. So this, we know, will be kind of an obstacle too big for some of them to overcome as we're trying to open up again.
And if I can
it's not like it's a 10% or anything, but I'm sure there's going to be several that are in that category.
Yeah.
And if I can add, where businesses tend to adapt themselves as well, on that 111 corridor, that's really the only place that we have fast food that's allowed, the drive-throughs. And we're hearing from, the McDonald's or the Taco Bells of the world. We've got a Dutch Brothers that'll be coming into town. We just had a new Starbucks and another one being built. And they're now saying we don't need much dine-in space. We've killed it on drive-through with this virus, and they are recognizing lower staff costs, cleaning costs. wait times, maintenance, all of those things to have a larger dine-in facilities. So they're already going back to their companies saying, what does that smaller footprint look like for some of the drive-through opportunities? So as you're planning in some of your areas that you do have the opportunity to potentially attract businesses, just note that they may be looking for a smaller square foot than they typically would be because of how they've been able to maximize and be more efficient. It may end up being a 2-lane drive-through versus 1, but they're recognizing there's definitely revenue to be made from that adaptation.
How are you looking at your budget, your city budgets with this, with, you know, the TOT decreasing and these fees being waived? How has your cities taken a look at your budgets? I've heard some cities that they're just planning 90 days out, being very flexible. The you know, city manager, staff, and council are being very flexible because they know that this is uncertain times. What have your 2 cities done about this? Or talked
Well,
about?
we just got ours approved last night, but with lots of contingency issues. So, you know, there's a significant reduction in TOT and sales tax for us as well. And so we made some cuts initially. There are kind of political pushes for, you know, police department reviews and all that. So that, but ultimately, we realized that we had to kind of have a point in time at the end of the fiscal year, get the next year approved, and now assume some quarterly updates as we go along and learn more. So that's pretty much what kind of staff is planning for it to be a non-traditional type of approach to the budget with updates and modifications at least quarterly. More than normal.
Right. And for La Quinta, we'll be passing our budget hopefully in the next few hours. Our meeting starts at 3:30 today. And we experienced a little over $7 million loss just from March to June 30th because of TOT and sales tax. And clearly we are looking at a larger gap next year if the economy wasn't to bounce back like we had hoped. And we're not planning, we're a very conservative city. When I shared the information about the loan program, that money came from an economic disaster reserve fund that we established a few years back with our Financial Advisory Commission. So we had $11 million in there to accommodate just this type of pandemic and this type of shutdown. So we are pulling just under $3 million to balance our budget for the following year. And then we've pulled that 1.5 for the loan program from that. So we have healthy reserves in La Quinta. We're still spending $17 million of our budget on police services. We have a safe city. We contract with Riverside County Sheriffs. We do have some challenges there, not from a service standpoint, just from a cost standpoint, because it continues to go up. And so we tend to kind of balance those needs and rearrange the service levels without compromising safety, because we have a low crime rate and our residents participate in a lot of the community outreach our Sheriff's Department does. And we do surveys with our residents, and they're extremely happy with the servant's response time and collaboration and relationship, but it also comes at a cost. So those are some of the things. We did do some layoffs. We did lose probably 8 full-time people, and then did some of the furloughs, you know, not filling vacant positions, things like that. So that helped us close the gap quite substantially on what our proposed shortfall would be, but we'll be, again, knock on wood, approving a balanced budget going forward. And we've got some making up to do, but I think we're better positioned than a lot of cities, even though we know it's going to take a while to recover.
So in Pasadena, we have a Rose Bowl operating company and a convention center that's also operating company. So they're city-owned facilities, but between the Rose Bowl requiring or, you know, relying on its own revenues for events at the Rose Bowl, what people don't realize is they also control the revenue for the 2 golf courses that surround the Rose Bowl. So for them, it's been a double whammy, you know, with the golf course shut down and then events at the Rose Bowl. So the city is the backstop for their debt service obligations. And for the convention center that has its own revenues for events, they get part of their budget funded through TOT as well. So again, a double hit there, and with the city's general fund as a backstop. So we have a 5% reserve and a 15% reserve. And we're already kind of scratching into that 5% reserve this year.
So Eric, you kind of touched on, you know, our number one question: is there going to be a Rose Bowl Bowl. Is there going to be a Rose Bowl parade this year?
Yeah, so that question is going to really get answered in the next couple weeks. So for a 130-year tradition of having a parade, I think only one time did it not occur.
What was
It's
that?
a real possibility that it will not happen this year. So the city does not directly manage the parade. So there's a nonprofit, the Tournament of Roses, that does operate that and the game, and they are in city facilities. So we lease the tournament house, their mansion, and we lease them the Rose Bowl. But ultimately, they don't want to be the ones to cancel it. So they're still relying on the NCAA to maybe cancel the game. So they have to kind of cancel the parade, but we'll see. It'll be really hard to have a parade with social distancing. So it seems unlikely, but it's not official yet.
Well, both of you are in the relationship making business. How have you had any problems with the bars opening and have you had any problems with the bars opening as partners with the restaurants?
Well, for LA County, that was down on the list. So this it's really only been restaurants so far. With bars, I think contemplated for this weekend. So we have had an issue, but we really don't have any. We don't have many standalone bars. It's really just most of the places to go drink are affiliated with a restaurant. So we're fortunate on that front.
Yeah, same with La Quinta. We've got one tap room for beer, La Quinta Brewing Company, that just has a sitting area in our little Old Town Village area. Otherwise, the restaurants will have a bar area with their food and restaurant dine-in. So it hasn't been much of a problem for us. In the beginning, when there was that short period of time where you could have 10 or less before it was you can have nobody, there was a little bit of stretching there. And that was an early phase in the pandemic where people were calling 911 if there were more than 10 people, at the pizza shop. So we had to manage that a little bit and balance code enforcement and police services and enforcement overall when the shutdown was happening. But the ramp up has been pretty good because we've even had the opportunity to call our businesses when the guidelines for restaurants came out. And some of them, it was right before Memorial Weekend, as you know, and some of them said, listen, either I didn't prepare to have enough food for dine-in, we haven't prepared the social distancing, we don't have a place to put extra tables and chairs to keep them separated. So we're gonna wait a few days or a week and make sure we're opening correctly and just keep doing our takeout and our delivery. So we've been relatively pleased with the compliance overall, quite honestly, with them wanting to do it right. Again, these are folks that mostly live here and own businesses, or at least obviously they're in our small community. And so they have a vested interest in making it be successful for everybody in a healthy and safe way.
Okay, so one final question before we go to our final thought. Have you had any pushback from retailers about closing down streets or taking some of those parking spaces?
Yeah, for us in Pasadena, that there was an initial push by a few restaurateurs to close streets, but it's easier said than done. There are a few segments that might work in Pasadena that we're still pursuing, but there's that automatic kind of challenge because retailers need the access, especially with delivery and pickup. So we have not pushed too hard on street closures like other cities might have an easier time with maybe a downtown street here or there, but we've not pursued that exactly for that reason.
And again, based on our footprint and our layout of what small commercial property and locations we have, that hasn't been an issue for us. It's more clearly an opportunity to look at how they can get creative and expand within the parking lot space or that surrounding area space without compromising any type of street pass through.
Mayor, really quickly, just for clarification, the takeout delivery signs that you mentioned in your presentation, were they funded by the city or were they funded by the Chamber of Commerce?
The city funded them and then the chamber delivered them and helped the businesses put them up. Okay. So we promoted them cooperatively together, but we paid for them, the production of them and design.
Okay. So this segment is called Final Thoughts. You both have given us such great tips. We really appreciate everything that you've given us. Is there one final thought, lesson learned that you want to bestow on our audience?
Eric?
Eric,
Yeah, it's been a challenging time. For us, it's been a little weird because we have our own health department, which comes with some pluses, but for us, generated a lot more work. It would have been nice just to kind of lean on the county to do all that. But again, it's a part of being a full service city. But yeah, you start to appreciate what things are like in good times, because boy, did things really start to crash down. And the little things that you take for granted suddenly are a bigger priority. So it's not really advice, but just kind of realization of how people's health is important.
Mhm. And I would say one of the other things we're doing tonight is approving the reopening plan for City Hall, and our City Hall will be opening tomorrow. We had made investment in technology after the last recession to streamline so many of our processes, and you can virtually do anything in our city online, whether it's short-term rentals, submitting plans for our new Montage and Pendry hotels that will be going in. All of those are with a push of the button. So business licenses, paying the TOT, all of those things can be done digitally. So when we were able to shift our employee workforce, some at home and some at City Hall, even though it was closed, business was, business as usual. We were doing inspections, but I'd say the best advice would be communication. Large amounts of communication, whether it's digital, whether it's making those phone calls, whether it's being timely returning those emails. We have not only a pandemic that I can tell you from the hospital standpoint, there are people that are very sick. And then there's also the virus that we may all have experienced at some point in time that's not impacting us. And it's just that thing that happens every winter. And then we move on. There is clearly a diverse component to the patients that impacts. But also on the flip side, it's having that communication and that thoughtfulness of knowing that people in our community, they want to work, they want businesses to be open, they want to help contribute. They're not living off the dole, so to speak, in our city. They're very proactive that way. And the more that we can communicate with our residents, with our businesses, with our city staff, to pull together and make sure that even our seniors in our high school, we did a lot for our seniors. We dedicated portions of our local newsletter. We paid for pole banners to be put up along that corridor. We paid for banners for the IB students. I mean, we're doing whatever we can to try to make La Quinta whole and understand that we're taking care of each other. But communication really is key. Even as we start opening things up, it's that touch base. We spent more time talking with our businesses the last few months than we have over the last couple of years, just because of the intensity, the desire to understand their needs, figuring out how we can help them financially, how we can help them through permitting or our health department, things like that. And we still have several new businesses that are in the works to come to La Quinta, which we're thrilled about. So communication, communication, communication.
This is definitely the time for our cities to be flexible, thoughtful, and have good communications, as well as being innovative in this time. Thank you both so much. We really appreciate your help. Next week, we are going to host another COVID, lucky number 21, the impacts of sales tax during COVID-19, a California Department of Tax and Fee Administration update. This is a great webinar. We're going to be talking with that state agency. So please sign up on the cacities.org/events website by 9 o'clock on June 23rd. And very quickly, please join us this week for our first ever all virtual mayors and council members executive forum beginning this Thursday. This is a 3-Thursday event. We used to do this in person, but we are going to move it to all virtual. That will cover the latest topics and challenges facing cities. And we'll also have amazing network opportunities. So again, please sign up for that, CACities/events. And we will be kicking this off with a thought-provoking information on brain science of effective action planning, even in a time of uncertainty. So I hope to see you, if not in a webinar or a roundtable or a virtual conference, I hope to all see you soon. Thank you again for our speakers, and thank you all for joining. Please let us know if you have any thoughts, comments, questions, and please stay safe out there. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.